We've all heard about the poverty trap, but do we really know what it means? Traps aren't there by accident, they are laid on purpose. Welcome to Development Unspun. When you're caught in a trap, it means you can't get out unless someone helps you out. When people talk about a poverty trap, that's what they mean. In the pre-SDG era, when we were all focused on the MDGs and the poorest countries in the world, especially in Africa, the poverty trap was understood as a lack of credit, a lack of capital. The solution, it was argued, was an injection of money to kickstart growth. Whether such a solution worked or not is a matter of debate. Some say there wasn't enough aid money. Some say there was too much and it didn't work. Poverty, in this way of thinking, has been the unfortunate lot of the majority of humans throughout history, and some are still stuck in it and others have successfully left. So far, so conventional. But there is a problem with this conventional narrative. It seems to imply, doesn't it, that poverty is an unfortunate accident, that sensible policies and probably an injection of cash will help to solve. But traps are not just there by accident. A trap is normally set, it's laid. One of the main contextual transformations of the last 20 or so years is that there are now very few what are called low-income countries left. Most countries are middle-income or high-income, and that's because of fairly strong growth rates in middle-income countries. And yet, within middle-income countries, a very large proportion of people are still living in poverty. Perhaps not the most extreme kind of poverty, as measured by $1 a day or other measures, but deep poverty nevertheless. How can that be explained? These countries have had access to credit and capital for many years, sometimes for generations. Why are so many people still living in poverty? Well, one standard answer is that the business and political elites in these countries have the means to invest in poor communities to help equalize the country, but for whatever reason have chosen not to focus on that. But what if the answer is even more sinister? What if the wealthy classes actively want the poor to stay poor? What if they are setting the poverty trap? I live in Colombia. It's been a middle-income country for decades, and it's been described to me as a vividero, a kind of great place to play if you have the cash. Living well in Colombia depends a great deal on the huge wealth differential and inequality that exists. If the wages of the majority improved significantly, gone would be the cheap empleadas, cheap food, cheap services, cheap travel. The affluent, often flamboyant lifestyle enjoyed by wealthy Colombians would be at threat. The privilege to which they have been accustomed and which they hope to hand on to their children begins to look very unsustainable. And so it's perfectly plausible, isn't it, even logical, to deduce that those that are currently benefiting from deep inequality, high levels of poverty, want it to stay that way. In the era of the SDGs, we are seeing more and more countries like Colombia. As inequality between countries continues to decrease, as the countries of the South grow economically, inequalities within countries are increasing. This is the poverty trap facing billions of people in our world today, hovering below or just above the variety of poverty lines that we in the development sector like to make up. This poverty is not an accident. It's deliberately planned, a consequence of decisions and instincts intended to maintain high levels of inequality. This matters, this analysis matters, because it affects the kind of policies and campaigning that we need to do in response to this poverty trap. There are three things necessary for countries to develop and progress: technological advance, economic growth, and political struggle. Technological advance has been rapid and transformative in the last 50 years, and even economic growth has picked up for many countries. That's why we have so many so-called middle-income countries. But that final factor is crucial. The lack of political rebalancing is the main reason that middle-income countries stay middle-income, with vast swathes of their citizens either living in extreme poverty or one or two rungs above that. And no amount of capital injection from the outside is going to change that. This is about politics and power. It's about voice and struggle. It's about taking on vested interests and winning. And the role of the international community is to understand this analysis and to take sides firmly on the side of poor communities. Fortunately, there is a win-win for privileged and wealthy elites if only they can see it. A few years ago, my wife and I visited South Korea. Now, she's Colombian. In 1967, Colombia's GDP per capita was somewhat higher than South Korea's, about $2,500. But by 2015, it was just a third of South Korea's, $7,500. South Korea is perhaps one of the most inspiring development stories. So what my wife remarked on was how Colombia had failed to capitalize on its opportunities. Colombia, like so many other countries, has failed to turn non-value-added exports, natural resources, towards a manufacturing economy. And its economy is sluggish for that reason, and unequal. What South Korea did was to invest in education and labor-intensive industry to turn that around. But it took the crisis of the Second World War and the Korean War to provide the context within which to do this, because it enabled taking on vested interests, particularly landowners. In South Korea, it's led to growth and progress beyond what anyone could have expected, a kind of progress that even the most stubborn elites could be persuaded to want for their own countries. Let's just hope it doesn't take tragedy and crisis to persuade them to move in that direction.